That makes 5 in a row for the Chicago White Sox as they lost to the Toronto Blue Jays 5-2 on Monday. For the second game in a row, the Chicago White Sox offense only managed 3 hits. Toronto scored 4 runs with 2 outs in the 4th inning off of Lynn to seal the deal. White Sox are now 9 games under 500.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. White Sox back at it, play the Toronto Blue Jays on Tuesday. Game 2 features Mike Clevinger on the hill for the White Sox. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Our Chicago White Sox, a pathetic 7-16 on the season, and now 6 games back in the very weak AL Central. Thank goodness for the Kansas City Royals. I'm sure they're thinking, thank goodness we might be able to play the White Sox soon. Look, if you're waiting for guys to get healthy and waiting for the easy part of the schedule, and maybe you're thinking it's just too early right now. Hey, you do you. I am very envious if you're able to think that way. I am just not there. Tim Anderson, we've been missing him. It looks like he might come back soon. He's been taking batting practice, doing some baseball drills. Either Tim Anderson is just the greatest spark plug in White Sox history. And his absence has just crushed the spirits in the clubhouse. Or this Sox team is just bad. I cannot believe what I'm seeing. At no point last season, and last season was really bad. They ended up going 81-81, of course, but at no point were they 9 games under. I think maybe 5 games under might have been the most, and then they went on a couple of runs. Maybe they have that in them. Maybe that old hope. I'm just not seeing good baseball from this team at all, and I don't know if simply getting Tim Anderson and Moncada back and playing maybe an easier schedule or warm weather or all that other stuff is going to make a difference. Pedro Grifol had a couple things to say after Sunday's loss. Again, that was the sweep of the Tampa Bay Rays. This is what he had to say. I don't like using the term "it's early," but it is what it is. We've just got to keep fighting. It's going to turn around. We've just got to fight. They're not going to stop the season right now, Grifol said. Buckle down and play good baseball. That's it. And honestly, I don't know what else he was going to say. He's right. It's not like, the rest of Major League Baseball is going to pause and wait for the White Sox to get better and catch up. They don't have very many off days coming up in the near future. They got to get right back at it. They've just got to figure out ways to win. He had some interesting comments in the post game after Monday's loss to the Blue Jays. Spent a lot of that time on talking about walks and, trying to be more selective at the plate and getting on base and, plate discipline. And I know that's important, but there's a lot of other things going on with this baseball team. Hitting the baseball hard, hitting the baseball over the fence. Looking at you, Andrew Benintendi, would like to see that from you eventually. That's pretty important too. We'll talk about walks a little bit later in this episode because there was a critical moment where a walk was important. Just a reminder, if you didn't check out the latest Locked On Blue Jays episode. Give that a listen. I was able to join Craig Bollard, who does a great job hosting Locked On Blue Jays. We had a great conversation previewing each of these pitching matchups, did a little Throwback Thursday, talked about some memories of mine, Blue Jays, White Sox history, of course, Frank Thomas playing in a Blue Jays uniform, hitting his 500th home run, and Mark Burley in a Blue Jays uniform in that 1993 playoff. But, he asked me a lot of different questions, really, about the season, kind of what's been going on with the White Sox over the last couple of years. And essentially what he was asking me was what happened to the Chicago White Sox. It was supposed to be White Sox Blue Jays in the ALCS for a couple years now. And the Blue Jays have been putting things together, and looks like, again, in the tough AL East, they're sitting at 14-9 now, and that puts them like fourth. That's unbelievable. The White Sox are 7-16, and they're in fourth place of the AL Central. Can you imagine if the White Sox were in the AL East? And I don't know if it's a matter of just the AL East is so competitive. You've got to figure it out in the offseason. You cannot just hide in a weak division and play down to your competition. I don't know, but the Blue Jays have a fun, exciting team. They made some moves in the offseason that we'll discuss. But my answer to Craig Bollard is, that's what we're all asking ourselves as Sox fans. Roster construction, misuse of money, misuse of the offseason, things hinging on hope and health and, return to accustomed levels. I don't want to put a ton on Pedro Grifol. This was essentially the roster that he was stuck with. I think there were some decisions that were made in spring training. Maybe he lobbied to get Benintendi on this team. He had some history with him, but for the most part, it's like this is what he was given. And these guys aren't producing. He's made some interesting decisions here and there in the bullpen and with some of the lineups and pinch hitting. But for the most part, it's like these guys that we were expecting to step up and just be monsters. If you look back to 2019, 2020, just wait for this team to start cooking. They are going to be winning division title after division title. And again, hey, we are late April, and yes, there's a lot of season left, sure, but I mean, I don't see it. I don't see how things are going to change. It's not like a bunch of new help is going to come in the White Sox way, unless something unlocks soon, and they start, I don't know, playing like the way they can play. Grifol, give some kind of pep talk. I don't know. They start clicking. I don't know where that's going to come from. So again, what happened to the White Sox? Everybody's asking it. We're asking it locally. It's being asked around the league. And I don't know. It's just a sad situation right now. And I can't believe they're sitting at 9 games under 500 right now. So how do they turn it around? Can they turn it around? I was listening and watching to the NBC Sports Chicago pregame. I don't always get an opportunity to do it, but I did, and I'm glad I did. They spent a majority of the pregame, Chuck and Ozzie, talking about, a guy like Luis Robert Jr. and his plate discipline, something I talked about on the previous episode of Locked On White Sox. I'm sure you are talking with other Sox fans in your life. What is happening with this guy? He was red hot to start off the season, and now it just looks like he has no plan whatsoever at the plate. Chuck had a really interesting point about how early in Tim Anderson's career, Anderson said something to Chuck like, I didn't have a plan early on. And then I had to figure out like how to create an at-bat, an approach, a plan. And you look what has happened to Tim Anderson over the last several years. And maybe that's the case with Robert. I thought this was supposed to be kind of figured out and worked on in the off season. There was a plan being put in with Castro and Tosar, and we're working on plate discipline. That's important. And in spring training, and it just doesn't seem like Robert paid attention or attended those sessions, or is just going to do it his way. I got paid, I got my money. That's what I wanted, and it's a sad situation because we see what he can do defensively. Wow, what he turned in on Monday, another absolute gem in the outfield, and he's got the defense, and thank goodness he's out there in center field. But man, he was supposed to be a multi-tool player, and the offense is just not there consistently. And if this is the guy he is, where he just goes on hot streaks and then he cools off, then we don't have time for it. And I think this is one of the big questions that need to be thought about, down the road, down this season and into the offseason. I can't believe we're even thinking about that right now. It's just like, how do you make a better roster? How do you, what needs to improve in terms of roster construction? Because some of these guys that they've been bringing in and thinking these are the golden tickets, like this is how we're going to get deep into the playoffs. We're not getting much out of them right now. So that was interesting to hear from Chuck and Ozzie. And then, Chuck trying to spin it with, well, the Sox have had one of the toughest schedules right now, and it's going to flip eventually, and they're going to be playing, an easier schedule. And Ozzie basically was like, look, I don't care if you're playing, tough teams, easy teams in Major League Baseball. If you're not playing good baseball, you're not going to beat quote unquote easy teams. And I thought that was, a great point. I mean, that's really how it is right now. I wouldn't be sitting here waiting. Oh, I can't wait till we can get into some of these easier teams. That's what they're saying about us right now, is I can't wait for the White Sox to show up on our schedule. The Athletic came out with some recent power rankings, and the Chicago White Sox, to no surprise, dropped from 22nd to 24th. The Toronto Blue Jays, they were tied for 6th in the most previous. Now they dropped to 9th, still a pretty good spot, a top 10 team according to the Athletic. And this is what the Athletic said about the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays worked through a busy winter, accepting the bullpen, adding Kevin Kiermaier, Dalton Varsho, Brandon Belt, and Chris Bassett. On paper, all solid moves with the specific intentions to fill needs. But nearly a month in, only one of them is excelling. Kiermaier, the ex-Rays fan favorite, is holding down center field, and he's off to one of his better career seasons at the plate, hitting .295 from the bottom of the order. He's a good lineup flipper, and his glove remains stout. We saw that on Monday. All in all, a nice pickup for the Jays so far. Their newbies account for 1/3 of Toronto's primary lineup, so they can't have Varsho and Belt dragging the entire year. But Varsho's homer Sunday was a nice knock and a 5-1 win over the Yankees. Kiermaier, though, has set the bar, and the Jays have a much improved defense. The Jays really do. We saw it on Monday. They've got some defense for sure. Varsho was 0 for 4. Bassett, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Kiermaier had some good defense out there in center. Belt contributed offensively, and so did Chapman, which wasn't talked about in the article. But, man, he is a guy you have to watch out for. He plays some great third base, and he has got power, and he displayed it on Monday. It seemed promising early on. Luis Robert took a walk. Andrew Vaughn did what we hoped Andrew Vaughn would do, and the Sox had an early 2-0 lead, but it did not last. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnMLB today for 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So again, the White Sox back at it in Toronto against the Blue Jays on Tuesday night. Mike Clevinger on the hill for Game 2. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Sox lost to the Jays 5-2 on Monday. Now on Sunday, which was that last game of the Rays series, an anemic offensive effort, just 1 run in the 5th inning. They had 3 hits in the game, which was a season low. Yikes. Kind of a repeat performance on Monday. So Sox have now lost 5 in a row. There has been a consistent lineup, though. Pedro Grifol continues to put Luis Robert back up there. I think it was 2 straight games now up at the top of the lineup. And you had Chris Bassett on the hill for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, Chris Bassett, a former White Sox guy drafted by the Southsiders 2011, had a limited time in 2014, and then he was packaged up with Marcus Semien for Jeff Samardzija, if you remember that trade. Bassett, we had an opportunity to maybe bring Bassett back. Could have used that arm. He looked really good for the Blue Jays. Nothing going on early. Lance Lynn, which has been a problem for him early in the game, especially giving up home runs through 2 innings, 0 hits, a walk, 2 strikeouts, only 32 pitches. Very different from his last start. Let's go to the top of the 3rd. Bassett, he's got this 74-mile-per-hour sweeper that he was using, kind of an interesting motion too. And then he'll hit you with a fastball at 94 miles per hour. He was calling his own game, which again is something very different and new for pitchers this year. Defending his position well as Sosa tried to get on by bunting. He was staying away from Robert Jr., which is kind of what most pitchers I think are going to be doing right now. Give him stuff out of the zone, make him chase until he can prove to you that he's disciplined. Well, Robert, it was mentioned he was 4 for his last 42 at this moment. Bassett really gave him nothing good to hit. And Robert actually took a walk, which was absolutely impressive. And it was a big deal, as we found out, when Benintendi hit a base hit to right field, which was the first hit of the game for the White Sox. So you got 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs. A big opportunity for Andrew Vaughn. And he delivered a double to center field, 2-run score. So Robert's 2-out walk was absolutely crucial there. Plate discipline matters. You never know what kind of rally you can start. 2-0 Sox early. So bottom of the 3rd, here we go. Sox just scored 2. How will Lance Lynn respond? A pretty nice life on his cutter here in the 3rd. Got his 3rd strikeout on a cutter low and outside. So I was hoping he would stay somewhere in that area, nipping on the corners. I like the movement. He ran into some trouble with 1 out, issued a walk, could not. And then Vaughn could not make a 3 unassisted play. So maybe, Lance Lynn should have gotten there. It didn't look like he had his best hustle effort. Maybe Andrew Vaughn would have let that go, let the second baseman get it. Fell behind Vlad Jr., but no harm, no foul. Rolled into a double play to get out of the jam. Lynn with 54 pitches after 3 innings. Again, very different from the last start. Bottom 4. This is where things, the wheels really came off. So Luis Robert Jr. early in this inning, bottom of the 4th, it was just an absolutely unbelievable catch in center field. The hang time that Luis Robert Jr. had to bring back a home run. He's not really hitting at all, but his defense, his defense has been Gold Glove worthy. That maybe was the 4th or 5th time that Robert has made a jaw-dropping catch this year. So let's go with 2 outs now. There was a 2-out walk in the bottom of the 4th and a 2-out RBI double by Sox nemesis, Whit Merrifield. So 2-1 Sox. Okay, Lance Lynn at 79 pitches, battling Biggio. And Biggio scuffling, Gordon Beckham mentioning it during the telecast, hitting like a buck something. Boy, Lynn completely missed. I don't know what his mentality was. It couldn't have been this. He couldn't have been wanting to do this, but an 82-mile-per-hour off-speed pitch that caught all of the plate. In Biggio, him hitting a buck something, it didn't matter. He crushed it. 3-run home run, 4-2 Blue Jays. Just completely missed the spot, I guess. And that's how Lance Lynn has been getting beat. His breaking stuff, his cutter, it breaks just into the hitter's swing, into the zone, catches all of the plate. Toronto scored 4 runs with 2 outs. Top of 5. Here's Luis Robert Jr. up, just chasing pitches once again. just looks lost. Bottom of the fifth, Lynn was back out there. It probably was going to be his last inning. He made quick work of it, and it was his final line. 5 innings, 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts, 101 pitches. His ERA is now disappointing 7.52. Now, top of the 6, up until this point, Sox with still just the 3 hits from previous, and they scored all those runs off of just Vaughn's bat in the 3rd inning. Bassett was still in the game. Pitch management was well, 77 pitches. Sox just continue to not be able to do anything. Bottom of the 6th, Sox bullpen. You got Gregory Santos, the 103-mile-per-hour man. I don't know if you saw that blurb by Scott Merkin recently on WhiteSox.com. Santos can bring it up there. He's got the fire. It was a roller coaster of an inning for Santos. Brandon Belt, mentioned in that Athletic piece, had a base hit off a 91-mile-per-hour slider. Gordon Beckham talking about how Santos should be using his fastball to set up the slider. Thought that was a good point. When you've got a 100-plus mile-an-hour fastball, you might want to show that and then, kind of screw up the timing with that slider. Santos issued a walk. And then he just kind of like a switch was flipped. He turned into a different pitcher for a couple batters, but then lost control again. However, Santos got pinched on what probably should have been strike 3. So bases loaded with 2 outs. Bichette is up and on a 2-2 count. He got Bichette to ground, hit a ground ball up the middle, perfectly played by Andrus. And it's perfectly clear that Elvis Andrus has been a lifelong shortstop. He looks comfortable over there. Top of 7, Bassett's still out there. Really nice job by him at dotting the corners with breaking stuff. Sosa at second after a bad throw by Chapman from third. So only 1 out. Here's an opportunity. Luis Robert Jr. up to bat. Toronto decides to go to the bullpen. Slider, sinker. Robert missed the ball by probably about a foot, maybe a foot and a half. Benintendi flew out to the outfield. Excellent use of bullpen by Toronto. Wow, they knew exactly when to take Bassett out. Bottom of the 7th, Middleton came in. Vlad Jr. with a hit, then a stolen base, a dribbler up the first base line. Like, that was not an impressive offense there by Toronto, but it got Vlad Jr. to third, okay, with only 1 out. Something that the Sox just can't do if they ever get somebody on second with nobody out. And then Chapman making up for that throwing error. RBI double over Benintendi's head. Chapman hit a changeup that was right over the plate. That's what happens to those types of pitches. Toronto, man, they can hit, and they hit mistakes. Jake Diekman came into the game with 2 runners on, which can be a scary situation. There was a walk to load the bases. George Springer came in a pinch hit, but a well-positioned infield, no harm, no foul, ground ball to end the threat. Top of 8, Sox still sitting on 3 hits in those 2 runs from the 3rd inning. Gavin Sheets coming in to pinch hit with a runner on first, and he struck out. Sox do nothing in the 9th. Chris Bassett, 6 1/3 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts, 98 pitches. Sox offense. You had the Andrew Vaughn double. Sox with 3 hits. Again, their 2nd game in a row with just 3 hits. The 5 through 9 in the order has been miserable. I'm sure you've noticed it watching, listening to the game. Saw something on Twitter. Someone put out there that they've been 0 for 30 lately. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it has felt like it. Berger, though, has absolutely been struggling. Here's a guy that everybody just needed to make sure his bat stayed in the lineup somehow, some way. Had a stretch where he was hitting home run after home run. He has cooled off. Last 7 games for Berger, slashing 0.95, 269, 286, just a pair of hits. One of those was a home run. Robert was 0 for 3 in the game, had a walk, had a run scored, but 3 strikeouts. Wondering what Pedro Grifol is going to do with him tomorrow. He's going to keep him up there in the top of that lineup. Good on Grifol, man. He is digging his heels in if that's what he does. This was per Ryan McGuffey on Twitter. Luis Robert Jr.'s last 9 games, slashing 081, 128, 135, a 3 for 39 stretch, 12 strikeouts. Previous 13 games, he was slashing 316, 316, 647, 5 home runs, and 11 RBIs. Absolutely world of difference. Robert is fourth in the majors at swing and misses out of the zone. Well, the Sox have an opportunity to still win the series, but first things first, they face a very familiar starting pitcher on Tuesday. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by So Rare. Hey, our new sponsor, So Rare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards across global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competition and rewards. MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span 3 to 4 day cycles. At the end of game weeks, So Rare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include So Rare Secrecy cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. Head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. So on Tuesday night, you've got Mike Clevinger versus Jose Barrios. And Barrios, he scuffling this year, 1-3 with a 6.23 ERA. Barrios has a 12-6 record with an ERA of 3.43 and 136 strikeouts in 22 appearances versus the White Sox in his career. The last 4 times the Sox have seen Jose Barrios, they beat him. 7 home runs in those meetings. Sox have seen him a lot over the years due to his time with the Minnesota Twins. Should be able to formulate a good plan. Should I say, we've seen a lot, got a large sample size here. And Pedro Grifol saw him when he was with the Royals and that whole AL Central stuff. So preparation, that is key, something that Pedro Grifol talks about quite a bit. Not a lot of guessing. There's going to be guessing when you're up to bat, but try to limit that with good preparation. Hopefully they put a good plan together against him. Clevinger, he needs to bounce back from his worst outing of the season, although I don't think he thought it was that bad. Clevinger, who gave up 3 runs on 6 hits and a walk over 3 innings while throwing 75 pitches, 44 pitches in the 3rd inning, felt like he had decent stuff during his last outing. It was good, Clevinger said. I think 2 missed pitches and they go over the wall. The other ones were kind of good pitches that they either blooped in there or were hit on the ground and they were just too slow. They executed on those 2 bad pitches, and then the fastball command was a little off today. That's what opponents have been doing to the White Sox. They've been making the White Sox pitching pay for their mistakes, something I'd like to see the White Sox do a little bit more of. Sox, again, still have an opportunity to win the series, get on a 2-game roll, then head back to Chicago, and their prize will be a 4-game series with the Tampa Bay Rays. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate you passing that along to other White Sox fans in your life. The Sox taking on the Jays on Tuesday. Clevinger against Jose Barrios. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM and the SXM app. Search White Sox. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. And hey, everydayers, on the next episode, I will recap Clevinger's outing and hopefully finally be celebrating a White Sox winner. Appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.